You might think going no contact protects you from a self-obsessed person. It does not. Because even after you block them, they are still inside your head rewriting what you believe is real from the hidden spaces. But here is the part no one ever tells you. You can crush a self-obsessed person's ego without moving a muscle, saying a single thing, or trying to get revenge. There is one mental change that affects them harder than anything you could ever say. I am going to tell you exactly what that change is and how to achieve it. Before I tell you exactly how to reach that level of mental separation, make sure you like this message, press the subscribe button, and share this with someone who needs to break free, not just physically, but mentally. Because the next part is the one that finally puts you in command. When people discuss no contact, they usually picture it as cutting off communication, blocking the number, removing the messages, and taking them off social media. And yes, that is needed, but it is not the main struggle. The real battleground is your mind, because the self-obsessed person's strongest tool was never their physical presence. It was the mental connections they put in place long before you ever stopped contact. These connections are the doubts they planted in your mind, the guilt they taught you to feel, the belief that you somehow owed them explanations, apologies, or emotional work. Even after they are gone, those connections keep pulling at you. You might find yourself replaying old arguments, imagining what you should have said, or wondering whether you were too harsh. You may feel forced to prove you were not the problem. You may still strongly wish for closure, understanding, or them acknowledging the pain they caused. All of this keeps them mentally alive inside you. A self-obsessed person acts like damaging software. Even after you remove the program, small parts keep running in the background unless you purposely clean them out. No contact stops the outside damage, but internal damage continues if you are still following their rules. They trained you to question yourself, to focus on their reactions first, to protect their ego and to manage their moods. Those regular behaviors do not disappear simply because you block them. They remain as automatic habits, over-explaining, saying sorry too quickly, fearing being rejected, or believing you have to earn love. When these habits keep going, they still have command. Their ego does not need physical access to keep going. It only needs you to keep circling around them emotionally. This is why just stopping contact is not enough. Without mental separation, you are still reacting to a person who is not even there, which means they still occupy the most valuable space you have, your focus. For a self-obsessed person, attention is like money. And the moment you stop giving it, even privately in your mind, their hold on you disappears. You start taking back your power when you realize that the story they taught you about yourself was never true, and you stop allowing their voice to determine your self-worth. This is when their ego actually takes a hit. When you no longer think about yourself in relation to them at all, people often assume that the way to hurt a self-obsessed person is to face them directly, reveal their actions, or finally tell them everything they put you through. But none of that actually damages their ego, because confrontation still gives them something they desperately want. Your intense emotions, your anger, your frustration, your heartache, even attempts to get closure, all of it signals that you are still affected by them. A self-obsessed person sees that as proof of how important they are. This is why yelling at them, dramatically blocking them, or sending long explanations never works the way you imagine. It does not shake them, it feeds them. It confirms to them that they still exist in your emotional world. What a self-obsessed person cannot stand is not caring about them emotionally. Not quiet that is full of pain, not quiet that waits for them to notice, but quiet that comes from genuine separation. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop trying to win, fix, or justify your actions, you cut off the emotional supply that feeds their feeling of being superior. They thrive on seeing you react because a reaction means they are important. Once your reactions disappear, they feel a kind of ego starvation. They do not know what to do with a version of you that no longer moves toward them or away from them, does not resist or hold on, does not accuse or beg. Not caring removes their power because their entire identity relies on being able to cause emotional problems in others. This is why trying to win against them emotionally never succeeds. The moment you are trying, you have already lost. The only thing that actually makes their ego unstable is showing them that they no longer have access to your inner world. Not caring tells them they no longer matter. And being unimportant is the deepest wound for someone whose entire self is built on getting approval from outside sources. When your emotional state becomes neutral regarding them, they experience something they rarely feel, a lack of importance. They may lash out, try to pull you back, provoke you, or pretend you never mattered. All of these are attempts to get back the emotional fuel you quietly took away. Not caring is not about pretending you do not care. It is about genuinely no longer needing them to understand, acknowledge, or approve anything. This is the moment their ego begins to break apart inside, because for the first time they are not being fed by the emotional reaction they depended on to feel powerful. Changing your internal story is crucial because self-obsessed people do not just control your behavior when you are with them. They control the story you tell yourself even after they are gone. During the relationship, they slowly train you to doubt what you see and replace it with their view. They make you question your memory, your reasons, your worth, and even your emotional responses. Over time, you start to believe that their interpretation of events is more valid than your own. This is why, even after no contact, you may still hear their voice in your mind criticizing you, correcting you, or minimizing what happened. That voice keeps you mentally attached to them long after the relationship ends. The change happens when you stop letting their story define what is real for you. Instead of repeating their words, "You are too sensitive, you are overreacting, it was not that bad, you are the problem," you start replacing them with your own truth, your version of what occurred, your understanding of the situation. Because the self-obsessed person's ego thrives on rewriting your reality. The moment you take back your viewpoint, their influence starts disappearing. This is not about forced positive thinking or fake confidence. It is about undoing years of mental training that taught you to blame yourself for their behavior. It is about realizing that their manipulation was planned, regular, and predictable, not a response to something you did wrong. When you shift the story from self-blame to self-clarity, you remove the guilt and confusion that kept you emotionally attached. You stop defending their actions to yourself. You stop making excuses for them. You stop rewriting history to favor them. And most importantly, you stop believing that their lack of care says anything about your own worth. Their behavior becomes a reflection of their own limitations, not your failures. This internal change is far more powerful than physical distance because once the story changes inside you, their mental hold breaks. You begin to see the relationship for what it truly was rather than what you were tricked into believing. And when that clear understanding settles in, their ego loses the invisible control it once had over your mind. A self-obsessed person's ego does not break when you argue with them, expose them, or finally walk away. Those things barely affect them because they can twist the story into something that still places them at the center. What truly makes a self-obsessed person unstable is emotional separation. Not quiet that is filled with pain, not quiet waiting for them to notice, but quiet that signals you no longer feel anything toward them. They need emotional reactions the way a fire needs air. Your hurt, your anger, your confusion, your attempts to understand or fix things, all of that feeds them. It confirms they still matter, that they still have emotional pull in your life. As long as you are emotionally tangled, they still feel powerful. Separation is different from just disappearing. Separation means there is no internal movement toward them anymore. Their messages do not cause a rush of nerves. Their name does not tighten your chest. Their behavior no longer sends you into deep thinking mode. When you stop reacting internally, you starve the ego that once fed on your confusion and weakness. Self-obsessed people want emotional disorder because it gives them command and they know how to control people who are still emotionally invested. When that investment disappears, their influence collapses. They cannot trick you into arguments, guilt, or nostalgia. They cannot bait you into re-explaining yourself. They cannot provoke you into defending your character. You no longer follow their emotional rhythm, and that absence is what makes them confused. What makes emotional starvation so dangerous to a self-obsessed person is that it reveals the truth they work hard to hide. Without someone to feed on, their sense of self falls apart. They cannot create self-worth internally. They rely completely on taking it from others. When you separate yourself, you remove yourself as a source, and they feel the emptiness right away. They might explode in anger, try to pull you back, criticize you, or pretend they do not care, but those reactions are proof of the wound. Separation forces them to face their own emptiness, and that is something they spend their entire lives avoiding. Emotional starvation is not about hurting them. It is about taking back your inner peace so completely that they stop existing as a mental presence. That absence is the hit their ego cannot recover from. Physical quiet is easy. You can block a number, delete a message, or unfollow an account. But emotional quiet is where the real effort happens, because that quiet is not about what you do externally. It is about what you no longer feel forced to do internally. Self-obsessed people do not panic when you stop talking to them. They panic when you stop reacting to them. Internally, they can sense the difference. If your quiet is full of pain, desire, confusion, or the hope that they will notice, they still feel in control. They know you are emotionally tied to them, and that tie is the rope they have always pulled. Emotional quiet means something else entirely. It means you are no longer watching for their reactions, no longer replaying their words, and no longer changing yourself to avoid upsetting them. It means their emotional state no longer controls your inner climate. Self-obsessed people survive on emotional energy, not just the feelings you show outwardly, but the emotions you create inwardly. If you are still worried about their opinion of you, still trying to understand why they acted the way they did, or still hoping one day they will acknowledge the pain they caused, you are not truly quiet. You are still participating emotionally, even if no words are exchanged. Emotional quiet is when you stop giving them space in your mind. You stop mentally practicing conversations that never occurred. You stop imagining future meetings. You stop making room in your head for someone who showed you repeatedly they would not do the same for you. This kind of quiet breaks down the power imbalance they created. It stops the mental feedback loop they rely on to feel superior. When they can no longer cause a reaction from you, not through manipulation, guilt, nostalgia, or even their absence, they lose the emotional advantage that made them feel special. They no longer get to feed on your confusion or your strong wish for closure. Emotional quiet tells them you have reached a place they cannot access or influence. It is the point where your recovery becomes louder than their disorder. And nothing damages a self-obsessed person's ego more than realizing that their name, their presence, and their memory no longer have the power to ruin your peace. When you stop performing, justifying, or explaining yourself, you shut down the very system the self-obsessed person depends on to stay in command. They train you to believe that you owe them emotional work, the constant clarifying, defending, proving, and smoothing over that keeps you trapped in their twisted reality. Every time you explain your intentions, defend your character, or try to clear up misunderstandings they purposely created, you strengthen their power. You are essentially saying, your view of me matters more than my own. And that is exactly what they want. They want to be the judge, the jury, and the keeper of the story of your life. The moment you remove the need to be understood by them, the situation changes. You begin operating from a place they cannot reach because they no longer have the ability to control your sense of self. Self-obsessed people manipulate through confusion by twisting your words, ignoring your feelings, and pulling you into endless cycles of explanations that never solve anything. They never listen to understand. They listen to regain command. They want you exhausted, unbalanced, and emotionally reliant on their approval. When you stop explaining, you break the cycle of needing their approval that they rely on. Justifying yourself is another form of giving up emotional power. It means you are still hoping they will see your viewpoint, recognize your intentions, or treat you fairly if only you explain well enough. But self-obsessed people do not reward clarity. They punish it. The more you clarify, the more they twist things. The more you defend yourself, the more they attack. The more you try to reason with them, the more difficult they become. They do not want things to be resolved. They want to be dominant. Removing the urge to justify or perform takes away their air. You stop reacting on their emotional timeline. You stop giving them the reassurance that they still have influence. Your quietness, your refusal to argue, your lack of defensiveness, these are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you are no longer willing to participate in a game set up against you. And nothing makes a self-obsessed person more unstable than realizing they can no longer provoke you into defending your worth or explaining why you exist. That is the moment they feel the loss, because the control they once had over who you are slips right out of their hands. Rebuilding your identity after a self-obsessed person is not just healing, it is freedom. Self-obsessed people do not just hurt your confidence. They shape the version of you that serves their needs. They train you into a role: the fixer, the pleaser, the apologizer, the stabilizer, the one who absorbs their confusion so they do not have to face it. By the time the relationship ends, you have been living as an edited version of yourself, cut down and reshaped to avoid triggering their anger, their insecurity, or their silent punishments. When you finally step away, you do not just lose them, you lose the self you were before they mentally rewired you. Rebuilding your identity means purposely stepping out of the mold they forced you into. The self-obsessed person thrives on the version of you that needs their approval, chases their validation, fears their withdrawal, or tries to prove your worth through sacrifice. When you start rebuilding, you become unrecognizable to them. Not because you change into someone new, but because you return to someone genuine. You start making choices based on your values instead of their reactions. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop shrinking yourself so they can feel bigger. You rediscover interests, dreams, and traits they once mocked, minimized, or discouraged. And slowly, the version of you they created loses its purpose. This personal growth wounds them because self-obsessed people need you frozen in the identity they gave you. They need you to be predictable, easy to manage, and emotionally reliant. When you grow past that, their ego feels threatened. They lose the mental blueprint that once allowed them to control you easily. Your confidence becomes a barrier. Your clarity becomes a shield. Your trust in yourself becomes something they can no longer break through. A self-obsessed person cannot control someone who truly knows who they are. Rebuilding your identity is not about revenge or proving anything to them. It is about taking back the parts of yourself that were silenced, ignored, or reshaped for their benefit. And the deeper truth is this: nothing crushes a self-obsessed person's ego more than realizing you became stronger because of the very pain they tried to use to destroy you. When you rebuild, you break the cycle. When you rediscover who you are, they lose the version of you they depended on. And that loss hits harder than anything you could ever say. The deepest blow to a self-obsessed person's ego is not your anger, your tears, or even your quietness. It is the moment you no longer feel anything connected to them. They can survive being hated, they can survive being confronted, they can survive you leaving. What they cannot survive is emotional irrelevance. The self-obsessed person's entire sense of power comes from your reactions, your confusion, your attempts to understand them, and the emotional problems they create inside you. As long as you feel something intense, love, pain, guilt, fear, hope, they still hold a position of mental importance in your life. When you reach the point where their name does not start a memory loop, their behavior does not demand analysis, and their absence does not cause a strong desire for them, that is when their ego experiences the deepest damage. Self-obsessed people rely on emotional connection. They need to know they can still affect your inner world even if they are no longer physically present. The moment that emotional connection disappears, they lose what they consider proof of their superiority. They do not view emotions the way healthy people do. To them, your emotional reaction is a score. No reaction means they are no longer winning. Feeling nothing does not mean you become uncaring or cold. It means you finally put them in the correct emotional category, unimportant. They are no longer the person you need answers from, understanding from, or closure from. The emotional cycle is closed not because they offered a solution, but because you grew out of the need for it. They cannot reach that place. They can only cause emotions in people who still care on some level. Even if that care shows up as anger or heartbreak, when you become emotionally neutral, you stop being a source of supply. They cannot provoke, guilt, mentally confuse, pull you back, or confuse you into giving them the approval they crave. That disconnection forces them to face the emptiness they constantly run from, the emptiness they cover up with your emotional energy. And while you are not doing it to hurt them, it hurts them anyway because their ego depends on being unforgettable. Your emotional freedom is the one result they never believed was possible.